Hi, Kevin.
Hey, hi, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing perfectly fine.
Well, it's good to see and hear you. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is the Wright Show, um, available on audio podcast as well as video streaming. If anyone's curious, and you're Kevin Kelly, and I guess it's fair to call you a tech visionary. That's probably been said about you, has it not?
It has. I won't object to that.
Okay, good. Well, when I say things you object to, feel free to object. But so far we're good. So you were a founder, one of the founders of Wired. You were executive
That's correct.
editor of Wired for a long time. You've written a number of books, including Out of Control. And if I might pause here for a moment of self-promotion, when the movie The Matrix was being made, the directors had Keanu Reeves read three books. One was your book, Out of Control. One was my book, The Moral Animal. One was a book by a snooty French philosopher who wound up complaining that the directors had not appreciated the profound significance of his work, even though his book was, I believe, actually shown in the movie.
Yeah, right.
You talk about your whiners.
Yeah. I watched all three of the Matrices trying to figure out what influence my book had, and I think it was in the closing spectacle of this sort of high creature thing that was going to, I don't know, take over the world in some ways.
This creature thingy.
Yeah.
Which leads us naturally to your new book, which we're going to talk about. The Inevitable, Understanding the 12 Technological Forces That Will Shape Our Future, in which it talks about how we're all going to become one giant creature thingy.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right?
So yeah, I think The Matrix has had it down. You can just watch The Matrix, I think.
No, we want them to read the book. And I don't want to do any plot spoiling here on the book, but people are curious, I'm sure. What is inevitable, Kevin?
I think, first of all, the book dwells primarily about the digital technological realm. I don't talk about energy, biological tech, which is vast. And I think most of the future is inherently, fundamentally unpredictable, and in particularly the specifics, this sort of the particular species level. But I think there's another aspect of technological, which is sort of this long-range direction, and those are the things that I think we can forecast. The analogy I like to use is imagine this really large valley and it's raining in the valley, and you're going to follow one particular drop of rain. The path of that particular drop is inherently fundamentally stochastic. It is unpredictable, but the direction is pretty inevitable, which is down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of like a gravity. And so I'm interested in sort of that large inevitable directions in the technologies, which are coming from the inherent physical makeup of all these technologies, including, by the way, bits and intangibles like that. They all ride on a very physical structure of wires and switches and stuff, and this gives it the leanings that it has. And so what I would say are inevitable are the general forms that we see, in the same sense that I would say that telephones were inevitable once you had electricity. Any planet in the galaxy you're going to go visit to, they have electricity, they're going to have phones. The internet is inevitable once you have phones. The particular internet, the particular phone system, the character, the quality, none of these things are inevitable at all. They're all something we have choices in. They make a huge difference to us. But the fact that you're going to go through this progression, I think these are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say is, in a sense, greater and greater cognification, more and more artificial minds, more and more mindfulness, more and more cognition in different things is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're kind of doing civilization, we're going to do more and more of that. That's inevitable. The character, quality, the specifics, none of that is inevitable.
So it wasn't inevitable that the iPhone would be available in rose gold.
No.
Okay.
And it wasn't. And while the internet was inevitable, Twitter was not.
Okay.
Twittering every 15
And
minutes.
the iPhone per se was not inevitable, but some device functionally kind of like that was pretty likely.
Yeah, something. A cordless portable phone, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on the level of, in biological terms, it's almost on the level of a genre, of a class. But the species level is not predictable. But the higher level organizational forms, bilateral symmetry, quadrupeds, those kinds of things, those are inevitable. And by the way, as you know, I'm talking to the right guy here, but the idea of this sort of directions in evolution is it's not universal in biological thinking. It's a minority view, but I adhere to the idea that there actually are directions.
Although I actually think when you state it clearly enough, it wins more adherence in within biology. I mean, if you make it clear that you're not saying that complexity inevitably rises within any given lineage. It's just that on balance, over time, the most complex organism tends to get more complex in the long run and things like and certain properties. And here we get to, I think, an analogy with your argument with technology. Certain properties were likely to be invented, like winged flight has been multiply invented by evolution. So it's probably pretty likely and so on. Right. Now, you use the raindrop as an example of something whose downward trajectory was pretty much inevitable. I would say, with your book, we're mainly talking about an upward trajectory. You're optimistic, right? And I want to talk about that and probably give you a little pushback in the course of this conversation. But I also want to first flesh out a little more in the way of the inevitability. You write near the end of the book. You write, "We are marching inexorably toward firmly connecting all human and all machines into a global matrix." Not a matrix exactly in the sense of the movie The Matrix, but the idea, I mean, do you kind of mean like a giant global superorganism here?
I do, yeah. So I think this is sort of the unseen narrative story of our time. Unseen in the sense that right now it's hard to visualize. It's hard to picture that, in fact, we have made a mechanical system that's connecting all these machines that we have, and indirectly the whatever it is, 5 billion people who are online with phones and not, and all the technological trends that I see going on will increase those connections over time, and but both physical time and also the amount of time that we spend each day connected in some way, and so we don't have the vocabulary to describe what that is. So organism is maybe one term, a machine is another, and as you know, I favor this idea that the differences between organisms and machines is very slight. So there might be something in between that we come to call this, and I think that this system, we'll call it a system for now, will exhibit certain behaviors that are not present in the individual parts, and so this is where we get the word of the superorganism, that there is a sense in which it is behaving in its own manner and with certain recurring patterns. And so I think we have very little clues about what that might be like, but I see every evidence that that's where we're headed.
And I guess in a certain sense you could say that with the one part of the superorganism idea is that the functionality moves to a higher level of organization. So we build and become part of a kind of a brain that is now taking care of planet Earth. I mean, our brains take care of us. And, smaller social information processing systems and political systems maybe take care of the society, but we're talking about something planetary here, right? And there's
right. And so I see it as a kind of a triune sense in which not only is the technology connecting the humans together, but also as we embed sensors and as we have effect at the planetary scale on the planet, that we also that the Gaian aspect of the planet, the weather, the atmosphere, all these things become part of this organism, machine,
Right.
whatever you want to call it, the system. And so it's very clear that we collectively have an effect on the planet, and the planet has an effect on us, of course. And now this machine that we're making, this third leg, so to speak, is also part of this this very, very large planetary system. And there will be many ways to view that, and we're at the very beginnings of this. And so what I'm trying to argue is no longer just a metaphor, that we actually can treat this as a scientific idea that can be verified by evidence or not, that we should be thinking about ways to measure and test, say, the theory. But at the same time, as you said, if it's happening at the planetary scale, if there is emergent phenomena, then that means that almost by definition we may not be able to detect or comprehend or understand some of those things that happen. And so that will be part of what we kind of have to look forward to. And this is where we drift into the idea that I would call that a kind of a soft singularity, in a sense of not this kind of information intelligence explosion, but the sense of having something happening at a higher level of scale that simply is really kind of unknown to us.
Right. So the extreme version of or one version of the singularity idea is that, well, first of all, things are moving faster and faster, and we're approaching a point beyond which it's impossible to see. It's impossible to kind of conceive of what's going to be beyond this point. That's beyond us. But there is this assumption or faith or something in the standard singularity hypothesis that whatever it is, it's going to be good, right?
Well, and whatever it is in some way transcendent, not just yes, good, but also transcendent. Part of the what I would call the hard Ray Kurzweilian version of the singularity is what they would call an information explosion, and there's a curious assumption about it, among many other things, which is that intelligence is infinite or can be infinite, which is there's no evidence that that's actually true. We don't have infinite temperature, we don't have infinite coldness, we don't have infinite speed. Why should intelligence be infinite? So I think the idea that it's benevolent is actually not assumed. A lot of singularities, and people like Elon Musk and others, right. Nick Bostrom, are saying, well, actually, it's much more likely it is not. So I would say the idea of this kind of intelligence explosion has a probability greater than zero, but I think is very, very unlikely, to worry about. But because it's greater than zero, I think, well, yeah, it's an existential issue. So it's, you should give it as much attention as you might anything that's greater than zero.